It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnet Bain. Good moment. Well, the question burning on everyone's mind
is the
question? Where did you get that shave, and how do I get one?
Yeah. Well, my wife said on Sunday, she said, your beard is awfully gray.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fine. I don't mind having a gray beard. Mm-hmm. But I got self-conscious, and I started thinking about, it's been 12 years. The last time I shaved was when we got married. And I thought, well, maybe I'll shave. So Monday morning, everyone left, and I stood there and stared in the mirror and said, can I, release, let go of?
Hair.
Yeah, this little fuzzy thing I've sort of had around my mouth. And I did. And it's felt good. It's interesting. Lots of feedback from my universe, as it were. Everyone has commented. So, but
is there anybody that you run into that hasn't noticed? Just said something different about you and hasn't noticed?
There are people who I know have noticed because you can see in their eyes they've noticed, but haven't necessarily said anything. Like my kids' teachers.
Like when my sister grew a mustache, nobody noticed for a long time. Nobody said a word.
Oh, I hope your sister doesn't listen to this show, Barnet. Every once in a while, I do just that sister piece. We talk personally about our lives, and every once in a while, I think what if my mom and dad tune in? And they have a few times, but rarely. Even Jasmine, she's
you should send them the gift series the whole year.
That's right.
The box. Send them the box series
with clips where I'm critical of their parenting styles.
Here's where
Lord, that would not be good. Jasmine's the same, actually. It's very funny. Every once in a while, I'm like, do you want to listen to the show? She goes, Freeman, I'd really rather not. And I'm like, well, do you not like it? She goes, no, I like it. It just always makes me nervous because I know you talk about our personal lives, and I'm kind of okay with it as long as I don't hear it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes some sense. Oh, getting personal, man.
Well, that's a big change, and there are basements and cellars of emotions and thoughts that come along with a big change like that. It doesn't seem like a big change, but it is a big change.
It is. There's a lot of different ways I can hold it. There's a part of me that, because my beard had gray in it, and I tend to be perceived as younger than I am, I felt like it gave me some authority, in terms of age, right? That I have a certain amount of wisdom, and, I'm 46 years old. And
Methuselah,
right. I had my little Methuselah going. But I'm glad to shed that because all that is just a story in my head, All these little threads are these storylines in my head that, to the degree I have some level of awareness, I don't necessarily have to run down that line. I mean, I don't have to keep playing that out. So
you were much older then. Right?
I was much older last week.
You're younger than that now, as the song goes.
Yeah, as the song goes. That's
so
fantastic. It's
very interesting what happens when we let go of identity.
Yes.
Or sometimes if we don't let go of identity, it becomes torn from us.
Yeah.
We become so identified. We can become so identified with a set of circumstances and how we and what we get from that in the world, how we present ourselves, what we get from that. It tops out. Or is it tap out or top out?
Either.
It fills
Taps out, tops out.
There's a point at which it doesn't work. And these are natural crises. So it's very powerful and inspiring when we recognize in ourselves and in others a conscious letting go. And I know that you've made there's a lot more to the shaving than simply a shaving. That there's
it's about showing up different.
A lot of meaning and a lot of showing up differently.
Yeah.
Which is a really great way to segue, which is...
Who's talking to us today about doing things differently?
The best way
showing
is
up different.
Is the segue. Well, our guest today is Adam C. Hall. Did you know that?
I did.
I'm telling you.
I don't always.
Adam's
today,
the chairman.
He actually told me he was coming on.
Adam's the chairman and founding steward of Earthkeeper Alliance.
He is.
Yeah, he is. He used to be an investment banker. I think he still is, but and a real estate developer. And he had a very unconventional and unexpected. It's never expected, but he had this crisis that altered his worldview, and a combination of letting go of identity and having it torn away from him, and from which he very gracefully reinvented himself. And we are here with Adam today to talk about it. Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Oh, thank you, Barnett, and great to be here with you, Freeman, as well, and all of your listeners. I do have one question for Freeman. Do you feel a lot lighter without that beard?
I do. I feel a little bit exposed, though. I feel like it was a kind of self-protection. There's a lot of things about it, you know? There's a lot of things about it. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to see myself in the mirror, or not a mirror, let's say just like a car reflection, right? I'm walking past something and I glance over and it's like, who is that? I forget. And then I see it. It's fairly dramatic for me, but I mean, it's good. I'm okay with even the part of it that I don't entirely know what to do with is okay, I guess, too, right?
Oh, for sure. I totally can relate to that, because when I began to develop a more intimate relationship with my own vulnerability, it is kind of exposed and opened. And so I get it, but I didn't know you with a beard, but I guess I look forward to hopefully getting to know you without one.
Well, you know what the theme of it is that I feel really fits with your sort of mantra is the undeveloping, right? It's this way that I saw myself, and the undeveloping, taking away these layers that I've sort of put on almost like armor, which I think really fits with what you're doing, which I'd like to talk about, because I actually have some background too. I was a developer at one point, and I had my own experience of it. I love the work that you're doing. I've had a chance to do a little research. So let's jump in there. This whole undeveloping, sort of really coming to a place where, a very conscious place of what do I want to put out? What do I really want to invest my time and energy in? And what's my vision of possibility? In this case, maybe for the physical environment, but really it's an internal environment. Do you mind jumping in and starting there?
Yeah, sure, and I'm with you on that. It is the outer environment, as well as the inner environment, and certainly, combining the two and working harmoniously with them. And I'm glad you brought up undevelopment, because that is this kind of the subtext of the conversations I'm having in the book that I just put out, and undeveloping the future. And one of the things that I found, you guys, was that I was carrying around so much baggage in my life, and whether that was identities, plural, all these various things from father to businessman to capitalist to all these other types of things, along with a lot of pain and wounds, I think, that I realized and shared, I think quite vulnerably, if I do say, from lifetimes. And so until I could kind of undevelop that aspect of myself and release and forgive and let go, then I didn't have any room to move forward and dream my life into being and become the fullest potential and serve the planet. So it was that undevelopment process. That makes some sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. We know from what you just said, as well as from practical experience in the air, that if you travel with more than carry-on baggage, you are in for a world of hurt. Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah.
Ba-dum-bum.
Ba-dum-bum. So the letting go of baggage, that is a process, and it is not always comfortable. And in your case, it was there was a lot of drama attached to it, and it's particularly interesting. It's a particularly powerful story because you were so powerful and you were so successful, and you embodied what so many hold as the dream, and yet you cashed in that dream for another one that is more satisfying to you.
Well, exactly. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, you guys, and I really grew up being a hard-driving kind of predatory capitalist, that life was all about achieving this quintessential American dream, this kind of picture-perfect life of the big house and the successful business and the children, the country club and the cars and the travels, and sure enough, I worked hard to get there, and somewhat ruthlessly. I'm not shy about that because I share it, and ultimately getting to that point and realizing, well, my gosh, something vital is missing here.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I love the language even. When you say painful, I think in terms of putting down the painful patterning, even if it's quote unquote worked for us, there comes a point where all these attachments, all this identifying with stuff, as it were, we recognize the distraction, at some point. I mean, that's the gift of the kind of breakdown that you and I both have had around, accumulating and amassing stuff and going, really? Is this it? And especially when it's at the cost of stuff that really does matter, like connection and purpose and service and a greater sense of, oneness and so forth. So that piece of the puzzle and coming to that, from my perspective, is very noble. It's kind of a maturation process. It's kind of like growing up in some way, because so much of this is so immature that I see around me in the world and going, really? We're really going to organize our lives in such a small story way? Like, really? Is that, I was there, so I'm not, I'm not wagging my finger. I'm just recognizing how distorted that mindset is.
Yes, it is. I spent 42 of my 52 years of avoiding all that pain and suffering and all those kind of things. And, the human experience is so, as we all know, is so extraordinary, yet difficult. And the difficulty for me, as I reflect on my map of my life, was simply that I avoided those places. It was, if there was shame, avoided. If there was a sense of guilt, I avoided. If there was a sense of lack, I avoided, and just drove hard into if I only had this or if I only had more. But, of course, those are natural conditions of being here on this planet and in this body and in this form, and to allow that to be and to forgive that and hold that from a place of my heart, not from a place of the constriction of that I was feeling in my stomach at the time. So that acceptance that you're referencing there, Freeman, is the key tenet to the undevelopment process, to unloading that baggage. And it's kind of like we're not frequent flyers, but we really are frequent flyers, and now you get charged for all the baggage you hang around. And in life, if we carry the baggage, the charges, ill health and loss of vitality and wellness, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. So many of our listeners are experiencing, I know certainly I have my own challenges, and many of our listeners have challenges in their lives in one area or another to some degree or another. You went through a tremendous letting go, a breakdown with your business partner, a breakdown with your business, a breakdown with your marriage, a breakdown with your, just a total life systemic breakdown. And so what intrigues me most is the resurrection story. What came forth in you? Stories. The ongoing, the ever unfolding stories. That allowed you to find the internal resources to choose an entirely new way of being. Because we can go through breakdowns and they happen to us, or we can consciously choose to have things break down for ourselves in an elegant way and resurrect without having to go through to the same extent the trials, the tribulation, that kind of struggle. So you are going to have some wisdom to share with our listeners on this.
Well, it is that long to break through. And as I shared, when it rained, it poured. But what a gift! What a gift! And
what were the takeaways that you began to give attention to as opposed to pay attention to?
Well, I really began to pay attention to the relationships that I had in my life, and I refer to them as angels, and both in what were visible and the relationships I had, for example, with my ex-wife, and I refer to her as the angel of death.
And she refers to you as, who are you, the Dalai Lama? We have to put a pin in this. We're going to return to this discussion as soon as we take care of a little station business. So stay with us, people. We will be right back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
You're back with Freeman Michaels and me, Barnet Bain, and our guest, Adam C. Hall. Freeman, you are brimming with something bubbling up too.
I love this conversation. And the part of the conversation that I want to just jump in on is, at least for me, this awakening process. And the revelation that comes with the breakdown is by no means the end of the story. It's the beginning of, for me, a kind of commitment. Because, look, again, Adam, you and I share a lot in common. And I'm not putting this on you, but I'm speaking from my own experience. Where
you were both mega industrialists.
Yeah, we were both. And so, you know,
Barnett, be kind.
No, but it's true. So, look, there's a personality type in that part of me, the deal guy, the clever boy. You know, the way that I manipulated and objectified people to win, which is how I was taught. But that pattern doesn't disappear just because I've awakened. I mean, look, my tendency to do that today, you know, I don't want to manipulate people. I don't want to objectify them. But that was a patterning that became pretty darn ingrained. And then when I look out around me and see it reflected back so often, it's like, wow. So again, I keep hearkening back to the painfulness of it. You know, the recognition. And I love the idea of really reframing all the players in our drama for what they brought to the table. I mean, there's a lot of master teachers that came in pretty, tricky forms, at least in my experience.
Well, very much so. And exactly some of the things that are the most difficult and painful in the cast of characters that seem to orchestrate themselves or gather, sometimes like a storm gathers. It's what is the gift that comes forth, and you know, one of my greatest teachers I was sharing was around what I referred to as the angel of death, my ex-wife. That was the biggest gift and impetus for me to take responsibility for my own life and to really look at it, like you referenced earlier, Freeman, in the mirror. Because the mirror's not going to lie, right? That's what it is. So it supported me and encouraged me, and although difficult and painful, to look at those places and go to those places that I otherwise had kind of filed away. And it's just great because the great thing about my life today, you guys, is that I'm a work in progress, but to be engaging it from a place of wholeness, from a place of spirit, from a place of gathering and collaborating and sharing with guys like you and others out on the path. So it's neat to be that work in progress. It's unique to my life, but it's also what makes it so worthwhile.
So you have discovered a new kind of balancing act. In part, you were exposed to this balancing act somewhat reluctantly by your ex-wife, who demonstrated to you the power not only of creating something but of destroying it and letting it go, and that nothing new can be birthed until you decisively let go of what was. And now your beautiful book, The Earth Keeper, subtitled Undeveloping the Future, is a story that, yes, it does cover the beginning, the unraveling. But more important, you draw attention to what is emergent. Here are all these strengths that you've had, and all of this skill set that you've developed powerfully as an earth warrior. You call it an earth conqueror, and you have those don't get let go of entirely. They just become put to a very different use. You're now balancing those warrior conqueror skills with nurturer and nurturance, and you have you talk about becoming a preservationist who is stewarding, for going from earth conqueror to earth nurturer. Did I get that right? I think that's certainly my takeaway.
Well said. A nice mouthful of great energy, because it's like that repurposing. You know, you guys, sometimes we think, well, how can I put this tool to another use or better use, to carve something new or to create something new, more that's more appealing to and more sensitive to my own heart and to my own yearning. And so that's really exactly what I'm getting you're saying there, Barnet, because it was about showing up for that, and then ultimately, if you're going to be in the woods, you can hang out there. But if you want to get out of the woods and walk through the valley of the shadow of death and rise again, then my goodness, you might as well put your gifts to good work and serve the planet, and certainly serve spirit. And for me, that was about looking at the life that I lived and the career that I lived to create a vocation out of serving the earth and out of serving the planet and people, and not just the bottom line being a profit for my pocket and serving myself. So it was that repurposing and putting myself to better use, and hopefully in my own little way I'm showing up to do that.
And I used the word maturing before, and that really is what strikes me about it. So again, something that's, Barnet, you've said many times in this show, is it's developmental. And so a lot of times what we rail against, which is this, disintegrated expression of what are essentially gifts, talents, and abilities, but used in a way that's not self-serving rather than serving a greater sense of purpose. At some point there becomes an awareness that there is a bigger game. And so, one of my own recoveries, because I really disassociated from the part of me that was what I'm calling clever boy, and that sort of created this, the company and the development projects. When it all fell apart, because for me it actually came apart, like the industry collapsed and I collapsed with it financially. I disassociated, and I'm just now coming to recognize the gifts and the value in some of the skills I had, and that it's a way of coming back to even business. I'm doing a lot of business coaching these days, and it's fascinating because I really do love it. But it's from this more integrated perspective. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what I think Barnet is pointing to. It's not that, I have a tendency to make things sort of good and bad, like, oh, that was bad, and then I'm disassociating from something that actually could be very repurposed and be very valuable in my life. And I think that's what Barnet is bringing up, because you're still doing the work. You're doing it now. I heard you speaking about your project in Hawaii, where it's scaling down a development, really looking at how do we make this, how do we use renewable energies, and how do we really make this an expression of possibility. And that's exciting. So it's still the same, set of talents, just repurposed, right?
Repurposed and redirected.
Yeah,
exactly. And out on the path, I was continuously was shared with me, and perhaps that's the same for you or some of your listeners. But it was really about cleaning up my own earth. First and foremost, that conservation and preservation and restoration of that. And then in the process of doing that is able to show up and look at how we can conserve and preserve and restore the land and repurpose and redefine the economic equation, but also the human equation. And to bring those two things together, it's early on, but it's game on. And that's what's making this space a lot of fun, and the conversation with ostensibly the predatory capitalists that are seem to be in some days taking over the world. They certainly have run wild. That's all fine and good, but the message and the time has come to really find that balance that Barnet referenced in the beginning of our conversation, to rebalance the experience, and that's really what I'm after. But to do that, I needed a map to get there. How do I go about it? What did I need to do? And so that's what the journey's been all about, and it's a lot of fun. I hope you guys are having some fun with it as well.
Well, we're having a lot of fun, and you know, I am from the inside out, wide-eyed and exploring this terrain, and every once in a while, I recognize a way shower, someone like Adam C. Hall, who reinvents himself entirely and models what it is to bring yourself fully as a giver, without abandoning any of what has come before. It's very inspiring. It's certainly
he's a map maker.
He's a map maker. It's inspiring to me. I know it's inspiring to others, and I am particularly. It's not lost on me that when you are referring to predatory capitalism, it is not. It's simply a reference to something that is. It's just a discernment that there is very little judgment attached to it, and that that you hold that with a compassionate understanding that is born out of personal experience. You personally have been to hell. You made it out, and you're able to look at with a certain amount of kindness for where people are.
And it can tip so quickly. I mean, I want to add that you know, it's so interesting because, again, doing the business coaching, I'm seeing people go into the disintegrated sort of bigger end of the stick mindset. And it's interesting because I can coach them so quickly by reflecting back to them, is that really how they want to do business? And they very quickly recover and say, no, I want it to be a win-win. They want it to be a win-win. I'm telling you, what I said before is true. It's a patterning. Look, I did it. I know this so intimately. I have to catch myself in that patterning. Your thoughts on that, Adam?
Well, it is patterning, and it's very much about finding a level of consciousness with that, and for me it really began with a place of forgiveness and holding myself in a place of just that I made in error and that I did not simply understand all the things that were going on and what I was up doing. That's not to dismiss anything. That's really about, for me, was my way of taking responsibility. And what was neat about that, you guys, is, and I don't know if you found this, but it enabled me to be able to rewrite the software of my human machine, to be able to re-engage in a process that now can be an ongoing process of rewriting and reprogramming and repurposing real time, right now, in the moment. So continuously to be in a place of co-creation, of collaboration with others, to get off the island of separation and division, but to show up in that place. And so I'm encouraged that there's this conversation that you guys are bringing, and I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing and engaging in out in the world, so to speak, of commerce. And ostensibly, it seems fairly daunting at times, but my optimism and my hope for our greater humanity is never been greater because of these kind of conversations and because of what is going on the planet. So are you guys seeing a lot of movement or transformational energy, or what's happening in your realm?
Well, like you, I have never, ever been more optimistic about where the world is going. And
I feel the same way.
I'm very, very excited. I'm very fired up about it. And so I see change everywhere.
Yep.
From the inside out, I see promising developments in every area. And the focus on what is not working is very much it's very much a concentrated perspective on things that shows up in the media, but it is by no means representative of what is going on in the bigger picture. I'm smiling because you're talking about forgiveness and compassion that follows. You can't really have you can't really access compassion without bypassing a bypass of forgiveness. And yet I know, as you said it, that we will receive mail from people who say, well, there's nothing to forgive and it's all perfect. And I don't say that in order to solicit a response from you, because I understand where that worldview comes from, and I understand that it is very challenging for some to own. We used the word breakdown earlier, to own a complete meltdown, and midway through our life's journey, we come to a place in a dark wood.
Yeah, definitely.
And in order to change paths, one first has to recognize that we are lost. We've put the ladder of success up against the wrong wall altogether, and that requires some loving relationship with. We do have to forgive ourselves, not necessarily.
And I think we forgive ourselves a lot.
Not judge ourselves, but forgive ourselves and others.
Well, it is learning to live in harmony and coming back to balance. Like, I love this idea of, there's an appropriate amount of sort of grief and kind of sadness for all the ways we missed opportunities. That's okay. I mean, I think it's really appropriate. And we forgive ourselves and we move forward looking to create more intimacy and more connection, because I think there's a whole disconnect from, again, something that, when you're patterned this way, and we're taught this as children to compete. We start playing musical chairs in preschool, and no one wants to be left without a chair. So you start fighting for, it's a survivalist mentality. So we're taught it. It's ingrained in us.
Then you want to own the chairs.
Then you want to get all the chairs, because that seems like a good idea in that context. But I want to just say,
I will rent you a chair. I can lease you this chair.
If I own all the chairs and just let people borrow them, then I can take them back whenever I want, which I see little kids playing that way, right? Because it's developmental. But I want to just comment, because you said, do we see it? Part of the business coaching that, again, I resisted. I didn't want to be the business guy. And then coming to go, wait a minute, I'm really good at business. Why aren't I doing this? The platform, which is collaborativecompanyculture.com, that's the platform. And I'm not self-promoting, I'm just saying that's what I created, to retrofit companies to become more collaborative, because the offer of it. Look, a lot of the folks like you and I 10 years ago who were caught in that mindset, you offer them an out, you offer them an option. They would rather collaborate. It's just a pattern. It's just a distorted perception. And the minute there's this generous offer of a greater possibility, heck, they want in, right?
Yeah. It's not right or wrong, yes or no.
And it's not a hard sell.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing is not a hard sell.
So, Adam, you're putting together big tracts of land, and you are stewarding them, you are nurturing them, you're holding them for the public well, and it's inspiring. What is on the horizon for you?
Quite a few things. But in that arena, what's happening is it's not simply getting to a greater state of conservation and preservation. It really is about the action and how are we growing corn with our business platform. And so, for example, on the project that Freeman referenced in Hawaii, we are, now that we've wiped out and removed all the development potential, at least that's the way we've structured it, is we're looking at doing something in the renewable arena, and we're diving deep into a renewable energy farm, looking at wind to hydrogen, and working on some things in that arena, which is very exciting. And Hawaii has the most expensive power in the United States, so it'd be great to facilitate that. So that's well underway. And then we're having the conversation in our real estate community, and we have a project that we've teamed up with a large developer up in Idaho to do an undevelopment project with a major publicly traded home company to create a new model around master plans, and to do that collaboratively. And so we're underway facilitating that. But the main thing is out planting the seeds and nurturing the seeds of the conservation and preservation and restoration of our own lives. That's the CPR, so to speak, of the life of where we are, to ultimately to that preservation of the earth and the support of others, not to save the earth.
You know, you and I are going to have to talk shop at some point. Before my whole empire crashed, I was working on a site where we really were doing a cool thing. We had a golf course that we were putting in, a desert course, and it worked as a drainage and as a green space. And we were doing parallel purple pipe, which you probably know is we created upgraded the sewer treatment facility in the area, and we were looking actually to use a new system that used antibodies, little critters that would actually turn the waste into methane, which would be captured by fuel cells. We're talking to an Irish company that could produce fuel cells much, much cheaper. Anyhow, I won't go into detail, but it was so exciting for me because the potential of, well, we could put a golf course in. I mean, it was an afterthought, right? But it was such a great idea because we had all this ideas of how to capture the rainwater, and just these incredible opportunities. So, again, good developers, when they have this change of heart and they flip, the opportunity to do great things. I mean, these are knowledgeable, wonderful people, as you and I, can be when we put it to great use. It's really exciting to me. So I'm on board with you. I love this stuff.
I want to know, Adam, how can people who are listening and people who are either listening to this broadcast or are listening to this as a podcast, who are interested in the work that you are doing and maybe aligning their resources and their talents and their energies, how can they learn more and how can they participate?
Please.
How can they make these kinds of changes in their lives as well?
Two things. You can check us out at earthkeeperalliance.com, and you can find out what we're doing around our conservation program, undevelopment program. You can check that out there. And you can also check into our movement, the earthkeepermovement.org, and join us there. We're happy to send you our monthly newsletter, which we're sharing innovative things that are happening around the planet and also things that are very concerning that people need to and should be aware of. So important piece there. So check that out at earthkeepermovement.org. And you can always drop us a note there. There's a little button that says connect. We love connections. We've been hearing from people all over the planet. There's a lot of great earth keepers out there, a lot of people that really care, and it's one of the things that brings the biggest smile to my face is connecting with others. So feel free to drop us a note and join the earthkeepermovement.org.
I'm in.
We'll do that.
And we'll have, of course, this available on the Cutting Edge Consciousness website.
I have one last question. I know we have to run, but you are an early adapter in this whole new emergent area of conscious capitalism. For, again, any of our listeners who would like to learn more about conscious capitalism, what are some of the more inspiring resources that you can recommend, apart, of course, from your book, The Earth Keeper, Undeveloping the Future?
Well, there is a book that was published not long ago by John McKay, the founder of Whole Foods, called Conscious Capitalism.
And Raj Sisoda.
And Raj Sisoda, great guys. Really enjoy their work. They do an event every year in the spring. This year it's going to be in San Diego.
You'll be there?
Conscious Capitalist. I'm planning to be there. I've been to a couple of them, and they're very, very much worthwhile. And then ultimately to really find yourself as you engage in your own commerce and what I'm finding in your own business, like Freeman's been sharing, think about it from that quadruple bottom line.
Yeah, I love it.
How does it affect the planet? How does it affect people? How does it affect my profits? And am I on purpose in what I'm fulfilling here in my terms of my own personal gift, but what am I fulfilling for the company that I'm leading or sharing or in the collaboration that I'm having with others? So look at the quadruple bottom line, because that has a very powerful message in its own right.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Adam, you are a gift to us. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. We look forward to having you back. And for those of you listening, we encourage you to stay tuned and come back, because Barnett and I will be back after these messages to wrap this up here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And we're back. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain. Great stuff. I'm fired up.
You look fired up.
I'm so in. I actually
You're
really
an
love...
Earthkeeper now.
Look, I love development. It's not, I don't want to demonize the industry and what I did before because, again, there were projects. We have this really cool, sustainable... we were trying to create the first sustainable project within Riverside County. It was like, there's so many cool things we were doing. Every house was set up for solar. We had rain gardens. We were doing this desert course, which didn't use resources. The reuse of water, which is such a huge issue in California, so that toilets would be flushed with recycled water. Cars, any watering would be done with recycled water. It was such an amazing project on so many levels. What's fascinating about that, because this is actually an interesting piece of what happened, is an environmentalist group is what blocked this project. And of all the projects I was doing, it was the one thing that the environmentalist group should have been behind. Mm-hmm. And I have a little bit of an axe to grind, because I really felt at the time, we tried talking to them and they had no interest in talking to us. It was sort of an us and them game. Mm-hmm. And it was primarily attorneys. We were trying to get through the attorneys. Mm-hmm. And someone pointed out to me that the attorneys were going to get paid because the developer always pays off, and the mm-hmm. attorneys get paid for all the billable hours they put into fighting the project. Mm-hmm. So getting to the actual people who filed the lawsuit that was blocking the project was very hard to do, because the attorneys stepped in and we couldn't talk to them. If we sat down together, we were all on the same page. Mm-hmm. I mean, we probably would have come to a resolution, but, disguised as, do good, it was not doing good. So I only say that because, I think sometimes, especially in our community, we can get to finger wagging. We can get to an us and them mentality. And it's not a generous offer. When we can get to where, again, what I'm saying about these business leaders, so many of them, they want to do a win-win. They want to retrofit. They recognize the limitations in their own patterning, right? So I think sometimes,
Well,
go ahead.
I have many of my versions of those stories of struggle.
Yeah.
And what they did and how they behaved.
No, I know.
And I can get seduced into them and do. Mm. And eventually, the way through it, it's not a way around it, or it's not a way. It's always a shadow play.
It is shadow play.
So it's always personal.
Yeah.
I'm dreaming it. It's not happening to me. Mm. And these sorts of things are always a map of my own psyche and my own patterning and frameworks. And
yeah.
So it's an opportunity to look at what is right in me. Adam Hall is a wonderful mirror of unconflicted flow. He had a lot of reasons to justify his anger and his operating system, and until it fell out around his ears. So I am inspired by that, because I would like to lovingly disassemble some of my framework before it unravels.
Yeah.
And lovingly disassemble it and use it as a mirror for my own shadow work.
That's
and
it.
Then not be in control of my life, but be in charge of it. One of the things that I admire in both your career as a builder and as just all of the various ways that you have moved through life this far, as well as Adam, is that you have a number of tremendous achievements. But I think there's a more powerful than achievements are accomplishments. So here are all of these achievements. big developments that you did, or big developments that Adam did, and lots of success and financial and marriage and big kinds of successes. But the achievements become accomplishments when we allow ourselves to be changed by them. And so all of these things for both you and Adam, these are high accomplishments, because however it looks to the outside, you are not the same men that you were.
That's right.
On the shoulders of those achievements, however those achievements turned out.
Yeah, and I don't, when I was saying that story, want to get righteous and say, you know, all I want to unravel is the complexity, and it is shadow play. I have to own that I'm...
What was that show we did about the seals or the walruses?
The
coyotes
dingoes.
and the
dingoes, yeah.
No,
it
you
is.
Want to reference that for our
well, it
listeners?
just is the dingo story.
The
That I have this friend who has gotten really righteous about the dingoes, and he's got this whole thing where he's trying to save dingoes, and it's admirable on one hand, and on the other side, it's an expression of the part of him that feels like, you know, he's a dingo, that he's been beaten his whole life and pushed down, and he's sort of living. It's what we say sometimes in the work that I do is, when we recognize a hurt aspect of us, and we want to fix it, you know, not from a conscious place, from sort of an unconscious place, we end up sort of identifying with it. And then our whole life is about identifying with that wounded aspect, which is what that dingo fight is all about. He's still in the fight. You know, again, I want to personalize this, because in my own life, all these little mini dramas that are replays of you know, kind of core dramas in my life, where if I can own it and go, yeah, I'm doing it again. Oh yeah, I just moved it over there, you know, because this consciousness work, and we've alluded to this earlier in the show, is that it isn't something you do. Like, I've awakened. Oh, great. I mean, it's a constant. There's a level of diligence in watching all of our little patterning pieces, you know, pop up again.
There are, of course, levels and levels of watching. There are, I don't know how many of you who are listening are familiar with reading music. When I was a little boy, I was in the school band, and I learned to read music in a very sketchy way. But you could play the same song over and over and over and become very, very adept at hitting the notes and doing all the fingerings. I was a brass player, and but until you change the key, you're not going to fundamentally change the music. And so we go through life getting really, really skilled and developing competencies, but we don't change the key. And unless you change the key, no, even if you scramble all the notes, you are going to top out on what you're able to achieve, and you will top out as a result on what you're able to accomplish.
Yeah, and this is the idea of changing the program, or changing even the context, right? So the reason for doing what we're doing, you know, it's interesting because it shifts. There was a time where personal development work for me was just trying to win in the small story way, like get the girl, get the money, buy the big house. And even if I was, you know, again, trying to be noble about what I was doing, it still was manipulating back to that small story of possibility.
And look, it still is.
Well,
so it's certainly, for any of us to say it's not, it's ratios. It's ratios.
That's it. No, that's good.
It looks like an expansive release, you know, of breath, and things look good, and then suddenly we realize, well, there are sort of niggling patterns of old behaviors and old kinds of things that, quote unquote, seem to be happening to me, and certain sort of struggles where I'm a good guy, and the developer and the environmental groups are now, and these sort of victim-y, sort of martyred behaviors start to show up.
Totally.
And it is, if we're very attuned, we can hear them as whispers before they become shouts and then screams. And we can respond to them and acknowledge that I still live in a smaller story and love that part. And if I love it, I don't have to be at war at it, and it doesn't have to show up. And it shifts the key that I'm playing the song in.
I love it. And that may be the Great Awakening, as opposed to some other version where we hit some kind of euphoric state forever and ever.
Let me hit the notes harder and louder.
Hey, we got to go. So
Really?
Come back again.
Wow, that was
we'll be
quick.
back to talk about it again, and we hope you're here
Thank
on
you.
Cutting Edge Consciousness.